Fortaleza is one of the most in-demand tequila brands on the planet today. It is also a tequila brand that I personally consider to be the best on the market today. I've talked about it countless times on this channel and on my other social media platforms. And every time I mention it, people always ask the same couple of questions. Where can I find Fortaleza? Why is it never in stock when I go looking for it? Why can't I find it in any of the stores near me? I'm pretty sure that tequila is just a myth and you're just making it up. I can't find it anywhere. And my absolute personal favorite is, well, Louis, maybe you should stop talking about it so much. You're the reason why we can't find any. And while I'm absolutely flattered to think that I have some sort of impact on the availability of this tequila brand, there are much more in-depth reasons why you can't seem to find this amazing brand anymore. And in this video, I actually wanted to break down all of those different reasons. And I even brought in my friend Rob, known as the Tequila Collective on Instagram and TikTok, to talk about the reasons why this amazing brand seems so impossible to find. But before we get into that, I want to talk about what makes this brand so special. So like I said, to me, Tequila Fortaleza is the best tequila on the market today. And that's not just my opinion. If you go on Tequila Matchmaker, you will see that their distillery is ranked #1 out of all of the tequila distilleries in all of Mexico. And the reason for that is just their absolutely amazing product. While the brand is a relative newcomer to the industry, only being created in 2005, the people who make Fortaleza, they actually come from a long line of tequila producers of over 125 years. Their family has been responsible for some of the biggest contributions and changes to the tequila industry throughout its history. And when Don Guillermo launched the brand in 2005, he did that with the explicit goal of creating tequila in the ancestral way that his family had been known for generations. And that's how this amazing brand was born. Everything that they do is basically handmade and created in a craft way to the highest level of quality possible. But if you want to know more about that, I have an entire other video that you can check out about why I think this is the most amazing brand of tequila ever. But I want to talk about why you can't seem to find any. And for that, I'm going to need Rob's help.
A pretty big question that I'm sure you get asked a lot, and I get asked pretty much on a daily basis. It's why is this bottle of tequila, you can't find it? Why is it basically not in shelves? Why is it stupidly expensive when you find it? Why is that?
So a couple things. Fortaleza is one of the most sought after brands at the moment. It is one of the most traditionally made brands, which plays into why it's so hard to find. Also the cost. It's super high in demand. Lots of people have learned about it in the last year or so. So because of that demand, supply has dwindled. And then on top of it, because they're so traditionally made, there are only so many bottles that they can produce on a weekly, monthly, and yearly basis. That traditional method obviously factors into the great quality that they're producing at Fortaleza and Los Abuelos, which are one and the same. But because that traditional factor usually takes longer to produce and produces less quantity, they just really can't keep up with demand. And because demand is high and supply is low, prices have increased over the last year.
Kind of like basic economics at that point. It's just like supply.
Essentially, yeah, it is. Yeah.
And the reason why, I guess I should have said this at the beginning, is that the reason why I wanted to chat with you is that you've been down to the distillery. You've actually seen their process. And so if you could maybe talk a little bit about that, just so that people can kind of understand that this isn't like some giant mega factory that's pumping out tequila. Like it's from what I understand, a pretty small setup.
Yeah, it's one of the smaller distilleries I've actually ever been to. So throughout the process, and this is going to get like tequila nerd, facts and stuff like that. So to make tequila in the most traditional way, there's a few different steps you have to take. One is the agave has to grow for anywhere from 6 to 7 years typically. That takes a long time, but that doesn't really factor into the production process. Once the agave arrives to the distillery, they chop it up into either quarters or halves, and piñas, the heart of an agave plant, can be pretty big. So they have to chop it up just so it cooks evenly. But Fortaleza, unlike a lot of distilleries, they use an horno or a brick oven, which uses steam for roughly 5 days to cook the agave. The problem at Fortaleza is they only have 2 ovens, and they're not very big. They can only cook about 42 tons of agave per week. So because they can only cook 42 tons of agave, it's not a lot to begin with that's cooked. And then where the bottleneck occurs, Fortaleza uses what's called a tahona to crush the juice out of the agave. Their tahona works about 16 hours a day, 6 days a week, and can only crush about 36 tons of agave per week. They don't really have the capacity to produce a whole lot of tequila. But once the agave is crushed and the mosto or the juice is extracted, it then has to ferment for several days, and then they can distill it into their Blanco tequila. The problem is when you get a bottle, say, of the añejo then has to sit in a barrel for at least a year. So tequila that is produced today is a Blanco tequila, but in order to get this bottle, which used to sell for around $80 here in LA, and now it's a little over $100, it takes another year to get this.
It's crazy. And so basically it kind of comes down to the fact that they're not cutting corners, and that every step of the process ends up having its own natural bottleneck because of the way that they're producing, right?
Exactly. If Fortaleza was using additives, they could cut down on production time in several different ways. One, the agave would be less ripe. So they could use a lot more of the agave because they wouldn't have to worry about where it was coming from as long as they just had it. They wouldn't have to worry about cooking time, cooking methods. They could use much more modern cooking methods and extraction methods. And then fermentation may not be that big of a factor as well, and they could cut down on time there. And then once they had their core Blanco, then they could use additives to make it look more aged and taste more aged and smell more aged than it does by naturally doing all of these things without additives like they do.